question I had was I don't ever have trouble falling to sleep. Like that's really rare for me. But I will wake up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, probably, I don't know, maybe 30% of my life. It's not consistent and there's no obvious pattern. I will have trouble falling back to sleep.
Yes, 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 yes. Okay. So this is not necessarily neuroinflammation, but could be. Okay. So sleep is one of those processes that's very vulnerable to kind of the multiple aspects of how oxalate can be affecting us. So let me talk about histamine as it relates to sleep, because this is another one of those things where you're getting brain effects. And of course, if you're not sleeping well at night, then your mood's going to be off. So there's all kinds of implications from that too. So turns out that your brain actually uses histamine to stay awake, in the same way that your body uses cortisol to wake you up. So at about 4 o'clock in the morning, your histamine should be down low. And then about 4 o'clock in the morning, your adrenals start to release cortisol to wake the body up, and your brain starts to release histamine to wake your brain up. And in fact, there's been research done by the US Army, which I thought was really interesting, looking at using histamine to keep people awake. Histamine starts to rise as we're waking up. There has been research done by the US Army looking at histamine to keep people awake, but I think that would be miserable because histamine keeps you awake and at high levels of histamine, but in a miserable way. So anyhow, so you're awake during the day, your histamine should stay up and fairly level. For you to fall asleep at night, your histamine has to drop. Now, for most of us, that part of the cycle works just fine. But the problem can be that your histamine level's running here instead of down here as a baseline. So it's falling down at night, but it's only falling to here. We're falling into sleep. It's enough of a drop for us to fall into sleep. But over the night, we can have oxalate moving. Oxalate can stimulate the mast cells. The mast cells can release some histamine, and then we bump up a little bit, and we bump up enough in histamine to wake us up. Then if it's hovering up here a little while because our body maybe is not breaking it down as quickly as it should, we're having a heck of a time to fall back into sleep. So my pattern early in reducing oxalate was fall into bed unconscious at like 9 or 10 o'clock, like just out like a light. My husband complained, like I would be asleep in less than 5 minutes. But my head would hit the pillow and I'd like literally be out, right? But then I would wake wide awake at 1. I'd have to go pee. So oxalate's been moving and the kidneys are doing their work trying to scrape it out of the bloodstream, but it's had a chance to irritate some things. I'd be wide awake until 3, 4. Then I would fall back into kind of a fitful sleep, not a very good sleep. And then my kids were young, so like 6:30, I'd be up for the day. It was a miserable thing. So that middle of the night waking can actually be histamine related. So then how do we get back to sleep? You can do a couple of things, and it's really going to depend on like what's going to help best with managing it. So if you're having a bit of a period of time when you're waking up in the middle of the night, you can try something like baking soda and water. Baking soda is a mild antihistamine, it turns out. And it also provides some pH resources. So if the kidneys are doing a lot of work trying to scrape oxalate out of the bloodstream, they actually need some pH resources because oxalate's an acid. And so your kidneys are trying to use, various pH supports to be able to get that stuff out. And so that can be helpful in 2 ways, both the pH resources and the fact that it's a mild antihistamine. There were times where I said, I'm so wide awake, I just need help to get back to sleep. I didn't do this all the time, but an antihistamine that penetrates the blood-brain barrier is going to help that brain be able to like come back down. And so I would take Benadryl. So if I knew I was wide awake and it was going to be one of those nights I was going to be like 3 hours trying to get myself back to sleep because I could tell how awake I was, sometimes I would take a Benadryl. Wouldn't recommend it all the time. There's research which indicates Benadryl may not be our brain's friend over the long term, but I don't think the odd dose to try and get some decent sleep is the make or break there. The research is making it look like everybody's going to increase their Alzheimer's risk from even small amounts of Benadryl. I don't know how I feel about that. So what I would say is, in general, it can help, but we would each need to take into account what our individual risk is. And the darn stuff's still on the market. So I can't believe it's as bad as, one dose and you're gone.
So would you, with the baking soda thing, I'd rather avoid the Benadryl if possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I get it. I only did that out of desperation
Yeah.
because I had little kids and I had to be able
I
to
don't
get.
have to get up for anybody most days, so.
Excellent. So
Um,
baking soda would be a good try then. Go ahead.
so just like baking soda in water and just sip a little bit, or?
There's research on baking soda which says that a half teaspoon of it 3 times a day took down inflammation in the spleen, which is one of those areas that's very hard to control inflammation. So there's some interesting research on it, but you need to keep in mind some people are sodium sensitive and that'll affect their blood pressure. So it's kind of a bit of a nuanced thing, but I would go for about half a teaspoon. I would consider, 4 ounces of water, and figure out what your effective dose is. So maybe you need 2 ounces of it and you're okay and it helps you get back to sleep, or maybe you need all of it and then you get back to sleep, but not too much water because it's the middle of the night. You don't have to get up and go pee again,
Right.
but that can be helpful. The other thing, which is an antihistamine support, is quercetin, but I don't think it works fast enough. I think it's one of those things you have to be kind of taking more regularly. But if you are okay with salicylates, quercetin does have a good reputation as helping with managing histamine overall. So that, like, if you were seeing a pattern where something like this was happening every night, I might start taking quercetin, 3 times a day, according to the bottle on your supplement, blah, 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 and see whether or not you got some benefit that way. My favorite thing is to take something called Basentabs, Basentabs. They're sold in North America by the Canadian branch of a German company called Pasco, Pascoe. And unfortunately, I don't know of any outlet in the US who's reliably carrying them. So I do usually send people to the Pasco website to buy it. Canadian buck's so low right now, you might do okay with that. Anyway, it's a combination of different pH balancing minerals. So it's using some sodium, some calcium, some magnesium, some potassium, some zinc, all in this combination supplement. So I kind of like that because you get the bicarbonate that you want, but you're not just getting all sodium with it, right? So this is another option. And I found that if I took the adult dosage of these things is up to 12 tablets a day, and they recommend 3 to 4 with each meal. I would never take it that way. But what I did was take 2 to 4 of them at night before bed. And sometimes if this was histamine related, that would get me through sleep.
Where would Alka-Seltzer Gold fall in there?
Alka-Seltzer Gold is the same idea in the sense that it's bicarbonate. The challenge is Alka-Seltzer Gold seems to go on and off the shelves. Like, I've had clients who couldn't get it.
I make my own.
Perfect.
Right. I think I sent you the
You
recipe.
sent me the recipe. Yeah. So I just want to make sure everybody out here knows that Alka-Seltzer Gold may be going on and off shelves. But yes, Leslie has sent me the recipe. And so if people are interested in having that, we could put it up on Patreon too as an option for people to be able to take it. It's going to be a little heavier in sodium. But again, like, the thing with Alka-Seltzer Gold is it tells you can take X number of tablets a day. So they're actually recommending a dosage which has a fair amount of sodium, and it seems to be okay. It's really about how sodium sensitive you are and whether or not you're balancing that off with potassium. And so that would be my only concern whenever you're using something where it's heavy on sodium and not balancing enough with potassium. But if you're using something as a potassium source so that some of the bicarbonate's coming from other than sodium bicarbonate, that's a good idea.
The other thing about making it yourself that's nice is you don't have to put the sweetener in.
Yes. If you can get something where you have control over the ingredients, you know exactly what's in it, that's way better than some of these other options where you're actually dealing with unknown additives or tableting additives, which allow them to make sure that the system doesn't get gummed up as they're trying to output the tablets. So I love when we can control things ourselves.